So, hello everyone. Here we are again at the Live Better Connected podcast, next episode in our series. And I'm particularly thrilled today because with me I've got Iain Milligan, who is the Chief Network Officer of 3 UK. Hello, Iain.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm very fine. And I was, you're a Chief Network Officer, one of the major network operators in the UK. What is that role? What does it actually mean for our listeners?
Well, I personally, because I'm a bit of a geek myself, I find it quite exciting. Like you've got the opportunity to actually provide connectivity to people out and about, and actually trying to solve different connectivity problems. So, especially when you're see how people use it these days, whether it's playing gaming on their phones and all sorts, so you can actually enable that. And I find that quite exciting because the technology keeps changing with it. So it's something I took on the role about 2 years ago now. But I've been within 3 and within telecoms for 19 years now. I started off actually working in their call centre, and I've just progressively moved through different roles, both from customer services and then to technical support, and then eventually through operations, then into my current role. So,
wow, so quite a journey. And I know 3 obviously puts a focus on gaming. I think you are a gamer yourself.
Yeah, I am and have been for quite a while. I think it helps actually know what to build for, let's say, because you know how good it should be, and the things that kind of frustrate you when you get that, you get the lag, you get the latency, all those things that.
And the reason I think that's really fascinating is because gaming is an intensive use of the networks. And am I right that the average user on the 3 network uses 25 gigabytes a month?
Yep, which is more than double what the average user is for any other network operator. Not just in the UK, we see it actually across Europe that we've got heavily high demand customers. So that's where a lot of our focus is, and not just on everybody talks about speed and the overall throughput, but it's the latency is one of the most important things, and it's around how you can actually route the traffic to where it needs to be as quickly as you possibly can do, because that's what gaming and actual future 5G services need, is that ultra low latency. And that's a big thing that we focus on quite heavily.
I suppose gaming is an obvious one that we can all relate to, but as we move forward and we sort of industry 4.0, sort of augmented reality, virtual reality, these are going to be sort of the key sort of really fascinating applications that use that data. And as you say, that latency, it's sort of, I always put it to, in my mind, it's now having almost a physical connection, which is not physical. That's where we're getting to.
Definitely, especially when you start talking about the future of autonomous cars and even drones and all the rest of it. These types of things, which are in niche areas now, but will grow and grow. And that's where it's more than just the mobile signal you've got to provide. And how we've kind of approached it is we've actually got a distributed core network across the whole of the UK that's like 19 different data centres, and each one of them we have the right connectivity between them all. But what we try to do is provide as much edge-based compute as possible, so you can actually handle.
And Iain, what does edge-based mean? And just again, just for our listeners, just what does that mean?
So the simplest way to put it is to, rather than having to, let's say today, if you want to get access to the internet, you connect in one part of the country and we route you to an internet exit point, maybe another part of the country. What we are actually, edge means is you're able to support the technology and the ask at the edge of the network itself. So you're not having to trombone people around, so you can put more compute space, more access to internet content closer to where the user needs it.
So essentially, you all that computing power is near you rather than off in a far away. So I suppose that adds again to that latency and speed.
It's all part of the challenge to hit the ultra low latency point as quickly as you can.
And this is where 5G is critical.
Definitely, because what the different features of 5G allow you to actually obviously handle the traffic from a radio perspective a lot more efficiently, but it allows you to carve up your spectrum more effectively for different use cases. It also allows you, from a 5G core perspective, to be more efficient on those types of edge scenarios by putting things more out in the edge of the network. Things we talk about, things like slicing, all those different things, and you can't do that with 4G or earlier technologies.
So 5G is a step change.
Massively. About network efficiency and creating bespoke services to be as efficient as you can do, and to guarantee more than anything else, actually, right now you have, let's say, one big pot, and you've got to make all the use cases work with that big pot. With 5G, you can actually say, well, I will now protect this level of service for this scenario, so you're always given that service guarantee.
And practically speaking, is that, for instance, having a sort of factory can have its own network sort of sliced off, or the emergency services having its own sort of network within the public network?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it could work. Or what you can get, like one of the scenarios, like from an agriculture perspective, is you don't need heavy data usage when you're out doing rural-based activities, but you need the low latency and the guarantee of a certain level of throughput. So you could create like a network slice which provides the protection of the latency and the protection of the throughput at the right level so that they always get the same service. And it means that you're not trying to broadcast everything out there to places that will never use it. So it allows you to be more efficient and protect the service.
Excellent. And I think that's a great segue onto what we want to talk to today, which is we've got two areas. We want to talk both rural and urban connectivity. And I think if we start off on the rural connectivity, I myself have just come back from the Isle of Uist and seen this in action. But you three has recently in the Isle of Mull, part of the shared rural network, you've recently put an install up there, which is going to provide new coverage.
Yeah, so it's under the SRN program, under the areas which are known as the partial not spots. We've got our pot sites to do, and so do the other operators. So we've been working on the Isle of Mull. It's actually been maybe about 18, 19 months that we broke ground, starting building it.
And where is the Isle of Mull? Just before we, for those that don't know, because you have a Scottish accent, and I imagine some of our listeners may. Certainly, it's when I went out to the Isle of Uist, the first time I've ever been that far north. Where is the Isle of Mull itself?
So if you go, it's if you get, first of all, you get a train from Glasgow for about 2-3 hours up to a place called Oban, so it's kind of northwest, halfway up Scotland. Then you get a ferry across the way, so it's about halfway up Scotland, northwest, and a good couple of hours on the ferry as well. And all of that journey takes you to the Isle of Mull.
Wow, it's a really, really rural area.
It is, but the thing so we've had the site built for about a year now. What we found as a challenge was not just building it, where you've got to use things like a barge in this case to get some of the equipment over. You've got to use a bit of helicopter build as well in other locations. This one was particularly a barge and starting the track build. But then once you've actually got it built, it's then how do you get the power and the actual backbone transmission, so the connectivity to it. So we've got the power underway. The transmission itself, you're talking about getting the undersea cables connecting the mainland into the island, and that in itself is a challenge, and it's still ongoing. But actually, what we've done in the last few weeks is we've worked with a satellite provider, and what they've actually started to do using Starlink is they've made available different approaches for backbone connectivity. So we've now got the site up and live. I think it was two weeks ago now we've got it live, and that's using the satellite transmission, which gives us the connectivity to then light up the full mast, which then gives full 4G connectivity to that part of the island, which is great.
And this was a first joint site, I believe, that has now gone live as part of, let's say, the shared rural network. The shared rural network, just for those who don't know, listening to this podcast, is a UK-wide initiative to provide 95% 4G coverage to the whole of the UK's landmass. But specifically in Scotland, it's up to 72%, because Scotland is one of the hardest places in terms of topography and challenging landscape.
Yep. What we have is we have these things called the three-way builds, or Trident as they're sometimes called, and it's between us, Vodafone and VMO2, we all build a number of sites for each other to then get onto. So this was the first three-way build that's fully live and active. It's a big milestone in the programme because it's really complicated, but also it's exciting locations to go to and actually to provide the connectivity to. And what I suppose is a good example of the benefit, as soon as we switched on the mast, and we talk about these are being rural locations and who's using it, immediately traffic popped onto it. So there's people out there who want to use it. So immediately it started to get used. It's never going to be as busy as obviously a city centre, but you see the immediately connectivity within the same day on it and starting to use it. So the demand is always there, which is good to see.
So literally it's gone up and immediately it's being utilised.
Yeah, never to a massive amount, obviously at this point because of the population. It's just happened, but on that day you've got the connectivity and you've got people using 10, 20, 30 meg, which is not massive, but it's a start, and I think it shows that there is demand out there.
But equally, that's an uplift on from what was potentially available before that.
Which was, yeah, it's largely nothing. It would be old 3G, if anything, in some of those locations.
Wow. So, and this is one of 66 sites across Argyll and Bute in Scotland. And as we say, Scotland's getting, I think, the biggest uplift within the shared rural net programme. I mean, you mentioned, the use of it. I mean, why is connectivity so important to rural communities? We often get sort of pushback on why you need connectivity in areas where there are no people. If there's no people, where's the demand?
I think it's an ongoing topic that's always happened, and actually the reason why the SRN programme came in was all of the operators for a number of years, and I'm sure the UK is not special on that front, was the commercial business case to actually roll out sites as an independent operator. And there's not much, but the good thing with the SRN programme is, and it's like actually that scenario, once we plugged it in and the connectivity happens, you never know unless you make it, right? And if you make the connectivity there and it's there, people will start to use it and looking for opportunities to use it. Because, like, for example, my uncle lives in the Isle of Barra, and he has done for the last 15 years. They had to go using old satellite connectivity, and they all took turns on the island to get access to the internet on specific days of the week and specific times of the day. And that still is the case in a lot of these places. What will happen now is we'll enable it, and that will become cheaper for them not having to do it. And it's just ease. You don't have to go to a specific location of the island to do something. You can do stuff at home. So I think it's important that it removes a problem statement, and it's about enabling people to be able to then do what they need to do without having to go through that type of hassle.
And I imagine there's some use cases which you hadn't even thought of that people are suddenly starting using it for.
Oh, definitely. Like, as soon as you get connected, and it's very similar to the power of what 5G offers. Is it's not just about building the connectivity; it's about making it ease for people to do what they need to do, and they generate their own ideas for things. Like, it actually, because on the Agri-tech approach, I wasn't aware of some of the use cases until quite recently. I visited a farm in Arden Downs last spring. And it was just out of coincidence. We've got a mast in a farm, and the farmer was talking to me about what he has been doing, and he's actually putting the equivalent of like the Apple AirTags on his livestock, so he could actually see where they were around the fields, and he had small connectivity and he had an app to track it all. And that was just something that he was doing because he thought it was a good thing to do, and that shows the opportunity and the innovation. And you can see around his field where they are, where they're moving, all that kind of stuff is. It's great, it's just something I'd never thought about myself.
Well, and agri-tech is one of the big industries that obviously agriculture in these rural areas is the main industry in many areas. And again, going to that point of thinking, what can 5G, what can 4G, what can it do, what can mobile connectivity do to these areas? But this sort of livestock element is really interesting. So that livestock, not only tracking livestock, which you've just mentioned, but also welfare of livestock. I always, Clarkson's farm, let's talk about that. Suddenly brought farming into everyone's consciousness, and you had almost on the simple basis, the SMS sort of system, which alerted a farmer when a calf was going to be born. But it goes much more of that. I mean, autonomous vehicles are not just these sort of fancy cars or, let's say, lorries. It's going to have a big impact on the rural side, agricultural side of things.
Yeah, I've seen some of the promotions on it as well, and it's all stuff that can be enabled if you're talking about automating like combine harvester, all these types of things, which is happening already, and that's where the importance of not just 5G but 5G standalone is so important, because what you've got is the ability to make that network slice to say, well, in order to operate Agri-tech, you need a certain level of the throughput, the latency, the upload. You need that protected so that people can actually trust to run their businesses off of it safely as well as efficiently. And having 5G SE will enable that to be able to be done and to do it consistently.
And if we can just sort of think of some of the, what are some of those use cases? And, say, mentioned some before, but equally, when we do get to that kind of level of you say, latency, what can vets do with it? They can almost use augmented reality and then access to vets that aren't in the local area, but actually can engage with a vet in a rural community. So giving those skills and that access to that skills from a much wider base.
Yeah, definitely. It enables a lot more of the remote management people being able to provide the advice or the guidance, and one actually it gets used in not just from well, it's the same scenario could work as like for field operations, is you can actually just send a specific generic person who's got the ability to do what needs to do, and the actual specialist can be at a location back in an office who can provide the instructions there and then over the service, over the connectivity, and be able to handle multiple cases and problems without having to go out to these remote locations or to do all these things individually, which would delay response times and actually potentially cause an impact. And all that is hugely made available with that type of technology.
So rather than a chief veterinarian going from one location and only being able to do that in a day, they could now supervise several across a wide area and in many locations. And just one area I'd like to touch as we sort of focus on sort of rural is the Internet of Things. A big part of, again, the sort of upgrades to the networks is providing capacity. And the Internet of Things, sensors, all over the place. I think we're at 15 billion roughly globally at the moment. That's going to increase to 30 billion by 2030. But again, in the agricultural sector, there's a lot about sensors, about sort of soil analysis and the likes. I'd be interested from your point of view. What are you seeing?
So where I've actually seen it is more so around how you would manage. So everybody comes up with the new thing to solve the problem they've got, like that. But it's the question that comes to us is around how do you enable it? How do you guarantee that I can trust it? And that's where the challenge comes into different types of things. Like obviously we talked about 5G, you've got 5G standalone, but the other thing is I don't know if it's been talked about widely, is 5G Red Cap, and it talks about you're looking at devices which have got the least amount of demand on them possible to be as efficient as you can do. It's reduced capability, essentially, is what Red Cap means. And it's around that, is making sure that you can make sure that the device, but the connectivity is taking the least amount of power demand, the least amount of compute, the least amount of bandwidth, so that you can just protect what people need. And I think that is one of the things you're going to start to see more and more of coming through, so that use cases for, exactly what we just said there, is cost effective and is guaranteeable.
And being cost effective, if we move away from Scotland, if we go into some of the more global areas, like sort of very sort of poorer areas, sub-Saharan Africa, soil erosion and soil and water retention is hugely important. I was reading a report I thought was fascinating, was these soils it means you can, instead of just blanketly irrigating areas, you can use the water you need because you know how much that soil is.
Yeah, and all of that becomes. I find it fascinating myself. Is you can end up actually making a big difference to the way in the way in which they can be surfaced and can be handled. How you can make sure that especially if it becomes contaminated, was one of the other scenarios I've seen as well. How you can make sure then that drinking water doesn't get to a certain level, it becomes a problem. All of that stuff can make a huge difference to those communities.
And equally, being wireless connectivity, it can be installed, fairly easily without having, the sort of major sort of plant machinery in it and underground and the likes.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes the importance of getting that ubiquitous coverage, where you can guarantee the coverage is there, so that whoever comes up with the devices needed to be able to do it, they can do it without any hassle.
Well, I think we're talking about that. Obviously, we've just gone from the Isle of Mull to sub-Saharan Africa. We're going back to Mull. I imagine the residents there. This is a really big impact that you have on those communities. But it's not just obviously the rural. We focus a little bit on the rural, but now if we come back to the urban areas, one of the technologies that 3 has been trialing is Open RAN. And before we go into that trial, it'd be just to understand, what is Open RAN?
So Open RAN's been around for a number of years, and it's the principle of there's always been the kind of tag that you get the big vendors, your Nokia, your Ericssons, your Samsungs, your Huawei's, your ZTEs. They build their technology to their specific standards, which are still related to the overall standards, which are the 3GPP ones, but they're very much locked into this is my vendor IP, and if you want to do something, you must take our full product suite to do this, to do that, and so on and so forth. What Open RAN is as is in the name, is to make the standards open and the connectivity open so that you could actually be more plug and play and more flexible to say, okay, I want to choose this bit of equipment rather than taking that vendor's equipment. I want to use this bit of software because I don't want to do that. And it's to allow you to drive more flexibility in how you deploy, be more cost efficient in how you do it, and drive performance better. And that's what Open RAN is there. It's a big part to enable diversification, which in the radio market and telcos is quite, it's the same people, it's the same vendors, especially in the UK. You only really have 2-3 big vendors massively in any case. It enables that. And what it also does is it drives a lot of new innovation, like especially in the UK, there's lots of different software engineering companies who are producing Open RAN capabilities and doing all of that. There's a lot of good working on it. So it's there to essentially drive diversification, to really challenge the big vendors to make things more open and more flexible.
If I was just to break that down into a very simple analogy, the way I sort of understand Open RAN, and please do tell me if this is completely off, but it's like the old, you've got computers, and you used to have sort of one proprietary computer. Let's say it sounds like a fruit, and you can only use those products. But the other side of things, the sort of PC side, is you can put whatever graphics card, whatever processor you want in there. You're not tied to that one proprietary vendor.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. The fruit versus the PC, definitely.
Oh, there you are. I've got something right for once. Excellent. So, and Open RAN, it is, as you say, it's been around for a while, but it's now starting to build up. And certainly you've trialled this in Glasgow. You tell us a bit about that trial.
Yeah, so as part of the supporting the government's wireless infrastructure strategy, as well as other kind of bits of innovation through there, there's a lot of drive there around how you do that. And there's a project which they invited a number of people to apply to last year. It's called the One Project for the Open Networks ecosystem. As part of that, we put forward a proposal working with another of other kind of parties to deploy, which hasn't been done in the UK, or I don't believe in Europe to the extent of what we're proposing, is deploying Open RAN with full 5G capability. And that's because 3 has the largest spectrum holding of 5G in the UK. And do that in a dense urban area. A lot of the Open RAN, which you would have heard, is used for rural areas or kind of low suburban areas. So we really want to trial it quite heavily. And now the reason why is we've got in our network a bit of a legacy setup where we've got 4 different radio vendors all in our network, just for different reasons of why we're there. So we've got some Nokia, we've got Huawei, we've got Samsung, we've got Ericsson. But one of the issues is when you're trying to deploy masts in a dense urban area, it's all about space. That's the issue. It's how you get access to the properties, how you do all of that can take a long time. So what we are going to do is deploy these small cells around the city centre using the Open RAN technology, which should make it easier for the interoperability between the 4 different other big vendors to both plug the gaps from a capacity perspective and some coverage, but mainly around uplifting the performance. So we're midway through that. We're working with Mavenir as a vendor for the radio. We're working with City Fibre. We're working with Freshwave. We're working with Accenture as well. So we're doing all these things to actually build this ecosystem and trial it out to see how it goes. So we've done a few bits of testing so far, but our full production site is going to go live in about 6 weeks, and that'll give us a good indication as to how fast we go, and we're going to roll it out in the rest of the city.
And obviously this is a test, and it's not live yet, but you've had run a small cell trial in Leeds, and what was the results of that?
Well, we've now done it in a few places. So what we're done is we've seen a good 30-40% improvement on performance, but there's a bit of a unique challenge to what we have. Like I kind of said at the start, we've got data hungry customers, really, really data hungry customers, which means that we then have a fairly challenging congestion problem to solve. And it's the thing we always have to look for new ideas and approaches of how to deal with it. So what we're looking to do, and it's what we trialled in Leeds, is deploying the small cell as a way to create breathing space for the main network, the macro network as we call it, above it. So creating this small cell layer that just sucks up underlying traffic to allow the wider network to perform better. And that's where we've seen a huge benefit. And actually, we see doing that in using the likes of Open RAN, because you can actually put a lot more power through Open RAN. We think will make a huge difference to any dense urban area. So we'll do Glasgow first, see how that goes. But then the plan is, if it all goes well, we'll trial it in lots of other cities and just make this part of our strategy of creating this small cell Open RAN layer to allow the wider network to get some breathing space to support everybody else as well.
Sounds like exciting times and a lot of innovation going on at the moment.
It is, and that's why it's part of the trial, because the trial is actually the collaboration approach. So it's not just about the technology, and it's not all just about three. It's about working with the right group of vendors who've got the same idea and actually come up with a good collaborative approach, and actually the right locations. And because this is one of the big challenges as well, is you need to have the right working relationship with the local councils, the authorities, which impacts even, for example, on the shared rural network. There's some locations that just don't want us to build, other locations do want you to build. It's the same in the city centre. So we've got a really good relationship with the Glasgow City Council, who want to drive this digital economy activities within all the local businesses, and they're making it easy for us to deploy. Other locations not so much, but we want to prove that way of working with them and actually go to those other locations and say, in this city, you've got the demand, the people in your city have got an issue. This is what we can do, and it makes a difference. And so that's another big part of it.
And how do you find, a city as Glasgow, I know they have a digital champion as well and seem to have a good setup on this. It's something we as Mobile UK are campaigning across the country. It's something we want to see from the UK government to put funding into. But how do you find, I'd like to, for other councils that are maybe looking at this, or those that may be more sceptical, for those that have been through this, what's their sort of taking them through that journey, and how do they feel about it at the end of it, when they've got that sort of much enhanced service?
Well, just be kind of quoting what they shared themselves, is that what they have in their local, in the local councils, is they have local businesses saying, well, I can't do this because I don't have good internet. I can't do this because I have to, if I want to do something, I have to walk to the front of my store. All these things, they now have a situation of all that noise goes away. So the problem then turns into, okay, how do I drive more footfall into my location? So the problem statement changes into, rather than trying to fix stuff that doesn't work, and how to encourage more, and a conversation changes. And I think that is the big difference. Is right now it's just, you can't do it because of this, you can't do it because of that. And the thing that's kind of brought to then life is then, it's the thing I said kind of at the start, is once you provide the connectivity, the innovation will come because you're enabling people to go come up with new ideas. And again, it's the same type of feedback. So from that, there's a good business case to then take to other locations to say, well, the local businesses in this location seen X improvement on their footfall alone with this type of connectivity, because they were able to offer more and do more. This is what we could help with.
And as this more and more embeds, again, we've moved a long way away from that sort of, it's a luxury product, having a mobile phone or having mobile connectivity. It's now very much embedded into society. It's a necessity. And it's interesting to see those councils that are moving forward exploiting it, and their businesses and their residents exploiting it. It's a matter of then keeping others up to that as well. Go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's also a good credit to the way in which, in this example, the Glasgow Council approached it. One of the biggest issues that I'm sure it's not just for telcos is like planning permission, how you go through the bureaucracy of getting stuff done. They took it upon themselves to simplify how to engage with them and how to do things. And then itself just makes it so much easier. And what they've started to do is share that with other counties and councils to say, listen, if you do this, you actually encourage business into your location. And that's really great that they're doing it. A lot of others, I think, should really follow their lead.
No, that's fascinating. I think it's exactly one reason why, as an industry, we are very much pushing the digital champion idea. It's about having a single point of contact, having someone who has the skills. and understanding to engage with the industry and for us to engage with as well, building that relationship. So fascinating to see that that's going on the ground. But it would be remiss of me at this time not to talk about politics. We have had a general election called, we've got the government. It has its wireless infrastructure strategy. We have opposition as well. My question to you, Iain, is what do we want to get out of both the government or whoever then comes into and is the next government?
I think the easiest thing that I see in my day job is just how to make things easier to get done. Like when you're talking about planning permissions and things like that, things just should be easier. We need to do what we need to do. There's demand that's there, but you do have to go through a fairly laborious process to do it. And it should be an opportunity for doing the right thing, and obviously we'll be held to account for doing that. Then it should be easy to get done, like it happens in other countries. Unfortunately, I think our processes are still very bureaucratic, and unfortunately, the only way to move stuff forward can be like trying to crack a nut with a hammer. It shouldn't be like that. There should be a middle ground for all parties to get stuff done. So that's my simple but very hard ask.
A simple ask. Well, we have both parties talking and planning. One has said it's a generational opportunity to enact some change. Others have looked at busting the backlog. I think we'd all agree that is essential. I suppose what we need to see is concrete action from both of those, and certainly from a point of view of industry and Mobile UK, we will be asking for that. Now, I think, Iain, I would just like to thank you hugely for your insights into both three, but also what's going on in the urban and rural areas. And for my listeners, we heard some very interesting stuff on the rural side. I myself, as I say, have been up in the Isle of Uist, and next episode will be hearing from my real world sort of on the ground experience there. I've also had the opportunity to talk to a local leader, a local crofter, and even a helicopter pilot about why it is essential, as we've heard in those areas, of using these forms of transport to get into areas where there is no access. So please do subscribe and make sure you're ready and you've got that notification bell to hear for the next one coming up. It'll be coming out hopefully very soon. Obviously we still can be found on all of our social media channels and on our website. So please do check that out. Again, big thank you to Iain, and I'll see you next time.